Hey everyone, Greg Woodward here, and this is your weekly win. It's often said you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but the fact is our brains are hardwired to do just that. The first piece of information we receive about a person or a situation colors our overall perception, and our perception is what governs how we feel about whatever it is that's in front of us. In this brief video, we're going to learn a powerful way to communicate value to prospects. And we're going to unpack something called biasing statements and why it's so critical for outbound sales reps to avoid using them. When we communicate value to prospects, we want it to resonate with them. But when we use words and phrases that sound like we're trying to influence how they perceive the value, they don't trust it the same way. Visualize yourself as a prospect receiving a cold call from a rep selling tax software. On the call, the rep says, "Our software lets you do taxes with ease, and not only can you save time, but you can save as much as 17%. Now, keep in mind, in the early part of the sales cycle where outbound takes place, we're dealing with much more of an emotional decision process than a logical one. So your prospect's subconscious mind is really the gatekeeper here, and it's what determines how they initially feel about you and what you represent. Phrases such as with ease and not only and as much as are red flags that trigger the prospect's subconscious mind to put up resistance. And remember, people can't help but to judge a book by its cover. So here's two things that you can do right now to communicate value more effectively to prospects. First, get right to the point and avoid building up to the value with salesy words and biasing statements. Second, when crafting your approach, think how it would look if you were not trying to influence the other person. What words would you use, and how would you be using them? We want to resonate with our prospects, and when we use biasing statements, we aren't able to do that as effectively. Let's look at the sales call again. Our software lets you do taxes with ease, and not only can you save time, but you can save as much as 17%. Does that remind you of anything? Maybe a car insurance ad, perhaps? There's a reason for that, because most advertisements use biasing statements to get the customer's attention. Now, think how most ads make you feel. Do they resonate? They probably just sound like noise and maybe feel like an inconvenience, so much so that you press skip when you encounter one on YouTube or probably even pay for premium subscriptions on some things just to avoid them. Think about that for a minute. You probably pay just so you don't have to listen to them. So using biasing statements when prospecting triggers a reaction in your prospect's subconscious mind the same way it does with an ad, which is probably to press skip, change the channel, or in our case, end the call. Whereas removing these statements from our approach allows our value to become the focal point of what we're communicating to the prospect. Let's go back to the previous example again. Our software lets you do taxes with ease, and not only can you save time, but you can save as much as 17%. Now, visualize the same call, but instead, the rep says, "Listen, I used it myself last month. It took me 2 hours to complete everything, and I increased my refund by 17% from where I had it when I did the return on my own." Put yourself in the prospect's shoes here. Both examples are communicating the same message, but one feels a bit different. Why is that? It's because the first example was positioned with biasing statements, like with ease, not only, as much as. And the second example was more direct and factual, like they're just telling you what happened. So let's incorporate this into a real example. My prospects are CROs and sales leaders. Here's how I'd communicate value on a cold call without using biasing statements. Prospect: "This is Frank." Me: "Hi Frank, my name's Greg Woodward. I'm a consultant based in DC. Firm's called Woodward Strategies. Just calling with a question. Do you have a minute?" Prospect: "Yeah, I have a minute." Me: "Okay, the reason for my call, I see that you have 11 SDRs and are hiring 2 more. So I wanted to share some background to qualify your interest in speaking with me sometime next week." Prospect: "Okay." Me: "I help venture-backed B2B companies ramp and scale outbound prospecting with a 6-week coaching program specifically for SDRs. My program helps the reps stay in stride with less hand-holding, and it teaches them how to cold call, build, test, and iterate their playbook. But here's what you need to know, and I'm happy to go into this in more detail. All of my clients see significant results. It's usually a 400 to 800% increase in sales qualified meetings booked across the team, and most of the companies I work with are growth stage or beyond. With that said, I'd like to send you some case studies right now, and if it makes sense, put a call on the calendar to show you what I'm doing to generate the results and how I work with companies and so forth. Would you be open to that?" Prospect: "Sure." In this example, I avoided using biasing statements. I got right to the point and was clear about the reason for my call and direct about my value proposition and why it's relevant to the prospect. I explained value with facts and used words and tonality that didn't trigger resistance. I also positioned my ask with no bias to remove resistance by leading up to it with the words, "if it makes sense," and "would you be open to that?" People can tell when they're being approached versus marketed to. People can tell. And even though we're told not to judge a book by its cover, our subconscious minds are hardwired to do just that. When we communicate value to prospects, we want it to resonate with them. But when we use words and phrases that sound like we're trying to influence how they perceive our value, they don't trust it the same way. Avoiding biasing statements is an effective way to remove resistance. And when we remove resistance with prospects, we win.